What do you do when the world's largest democracy decides it no longer needs your permission? You push back hard. This isn't just about tariffs. It's about control. And right now, India is breaking free. The United States knows it and it sits nervous. On July 30th, former US President Donald Trump threatened to slap a 25% tariff on Indian exports. The official reason, trade imbalance. The real reason, India is rising fast and Washington doesn't like what it can't control. Let me tell you something. As someone who conquered America from the outside, first through bodybuilding, then Hollywood, then politics, I understand what it means to challenge established power structures. And what I'm seeing now is India doing exactly what I did decades ago, refusing to play by someone else's rules and building their own path to dominance. India isn't just catching up, it's building a parallel future. And that is making old superpowers very, very uncomfortable. See, the United States has been the global pace setter for over a century technologically, economically, even culturally. But now we're watching a new kind of nation rise, not by copying the West, but by doing something far more interesting, competing on its own terms. And as someone who never accepted being told what I couldn't achieve, I recognized this mindset immediately. India is now the 5th largest economy in the world, actually on track to hit number 3 by the end of this decade, possibly overtaking Japan and Germany. But this isn't just about GDP. This is about what kind of power India is becoming. Look at numbers, over 1.44 billion people, and most of them are under the age of 30. That's a tech-driven demographic explosion. 1 billion smartphones, over 900 million internet users by next year. You're basically watching the largest connected democracy ever built go online in real time. And here's the crazy part. India is doing it with homegrown tools. UPI, their digital payment system, isn't just competing with Visa and MasterCard. It's outpacing them in transaction volume. ESR, their space agency, launched Chandrayaan-3 to the moon's south pole for less than the budget of a Hollywood movie. And yes, they're planning a crewed space flight called Gaganyaan by 2026. This kind of progress isn't random, it's strategic. India is pushing to become a leader in semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, defense manufacturing and green energy. Not by importing innovation, but by building ecosystems, and with programs like Make in India, they're not just talking, they're scaling at speed. Apple, Tesla suppliers, Google data centers, they're all moving in because India isn't just a market, it's a manufacturing alternative to China. And in a world defined by disrupted supply chains and shifting alliances, that's massive. As someone who built multiple empires by understanding systematic progression, I can tell you this is what real strategic building looks like. So what does this mean for the US? Well, let's just be honest. Washington is used to being the axis of power. When the US calls, countries usually listen. But India listens and then it makes its own decisions. That's the part people in DC are starting to realize. India isn't becoming an ally in the traditional sense. It's becoming a pole of its own, autonomous, independent, pragmatic. And that scares policymakers not because India is hostile, but because it's sovereign. That's a very different kind of power. One that doesn't ask for permission. But here's where it gets interesting. This is not about rivalry. This is about multipolar stability. The idea that the future will not be dominated by one superpower, but shaped by many credible voices. And India is one of those voices now. So yes, the US feels pressure. Yes, Trump's tariffs are a reaction. But let's not mistake reaction for reality, because the truth is India isn't rising to challenge anyone. It's rising because it finally can. And for 1 billion people who've waited generations for their shot, that's not a threat. That's destiny finally catching up. So yeah, if you're still wondering why the US is suddenly so loud about trade deficits and Russian oil, it's not just about economics. It is about the world realizing India doesn't need to follow anymore. It's ready to lead. Alright? So let's get into the real mechanics behind Trump's 25% tariff threat on India. Because this isn't just some random political outburst or a headline grab. It's a very calculated move, one driven by pressure, power dynamics, and frankly old world assumptions about how global influence should work. Let's start with trade. The US has always operated under the assumption that its markets are the reward and access to them must come with strings attached. For decades, that made sense. America had the deepest pockets, the most consumers, and the tech every country wanted. But fast forward to 2025, and suddenly the game's changed. India is not just producing for America anymore. It's producing for itself and for the rest of the world. Now Trump's team argues that Indian exports, textiles, auto parts, electronics, pharma enjoy unfair access to US markets while American goods face high tariffs in India. They say it's an excessively one-sided deal. And in raw numbers, they're partially right. For example, average Indian tariffs on US farm goods around 39%. US tariffs on Indian goods closer to 7%. But here's the catch. India has 1.4 billion people. Many live in rural or semi-urban areas. You can't just open the floodgates to American corn, milk or wheat and expect local farmers to survive. This isn't protectionism. It's drumstick preservation. India's government is trying to lift hundreds of millions out of poverty without collapsing its rural economy in the process. But for Trump, nuance isn't the point. Leverage is. His approach to trade isn't about win-win. It's about win more. If you start buying Russian oil, if you start buying Russian defense systems, and if you start not letting American agriculture into your markets, he's going to squeeze you. That's the Trump doctrine, plain and simple. So when India kept buying Russian S-400 missile systems despite Katsa threats and started importing discounted Russian oil during the Ukraine war, Washington took it personally. Not because India violated any treaties. It didn't, but because it made an independent decision. That's the part they couldn't digest. Let's also talk strategy. The US is currently locked in a high-stakes rivalry with China. It sees India as a natural counterweight in Asia. But here's the contradiction. America wants India to be a partner, but also behave like a junior partner, and that's just not going to happen anymore. India wants strategic autonomy, the freedom to do business with the US, Russia, France, Japan, or whoever it chooses. That's not defiance, that's diplomacy in a multipolar world. So why now? Why did Trump go public with the tariff threat in July 2025? Because he's in campaign mode. He wants to show American voters that he's tough on trade, tough on China, tough on anyone who doesn't play fair. India just became the latest target. Not because it's weak, but because it's visible. That's the irony. The more powerful India becomes, the more pressure it faces, not just from enemies, but from allies, because power attracts friction. And Trump knows that. He's using India as an example, as a warning to other nations. Play by American terms or pay the price. But here's the problem with that logic. It assumes the old playbook still works, that tariffs and threats will bring countries back in line. What it doesn't account for is a new generation of nations that are self-confident, self-reliant, and not afraid of recalibrating their own path. India isn't rejecting the US, it's simply not submitting to it. And that's what triggered Trump. Here's something people don't realize. India is no longer playing a binary game. It's not choosing between East and West. It's building its own network. Think of it like a new kind of operating system, one that doesn't rely on just one app store